Welcome back to another edition of Inside BBI with John and Eric. I'm John McDevitt, and with me, as always, senior editor of Big Blue Interactive, Mr. Eric Kennedy. And Eric, not a lot's going on. I mean, the Eagles won the Super Bowl.
Oh, you had to go there. You had.
I didn't want to. Like,
No,
I
no.
tried
I didn't
so.
watch the game. I didn't want. I watched the
No,
movie. I wasn't going to subject to apparently, I didn't miss anything. From what I can tell, the game was awful. The halftime show was awful. The commercials were pretty bad. So apparently, I didn't miss anything. So
I
it's the first Super Bowl I can remember. I think it's the first Super Bowl that I haven't watched. But I can't stomach that, and I'm glad I didn't have to. I didn't watch the Eagles. I can't.
I watched it. I don't miss them regardless, but oh God. First off, I mean, it's not okay. We can't do anything about whether or not Philadelphia wins or loses. However, why did Patrick Mahomes have to play the worst game of his career in this particular game? The only redeeming factor or the less dagger of the situation was that it wasn't Barkley going wild and he was like 2 touchdowns and just he was just basically a bit player in this game. It was Jalen Hurts, it was the Eagles defense, and if anything, it did send a reminder of if the Giants want to get back at things, and you've beat this drum so many times. There's two sides of the ball that you have to win. It's not the offense and the defense. It's literally on the line. It's the offensive line and
Yeah.
the defensive line, and their defensive line dominated that game. It really, after the first quarter, and even you could say within the first quarter, it wasn't even close.
Yeah. I think, well, I didn't see again. I didn't see the game, but that's what I heard. I think moving forward in the NFL today, you got to have the quarterback. I'm sorry, you do. You just have to have the
Yep.
quarterback. And
Yep.
I think you've got to be strong on the lines. And if you have those two things, you can work around the other stuff. But you can't game plan being weak up front. You're either weak up front or you're strong up front, and there's no way you can hide that. So, but and you can't hide. You can only hide bad quarterbacking so far, and you can't win in the playoffs. And as much crap as Jalen Hurts gets, he rose to the occasion, and the Eagles deserve to win. I mean, obviously, not just their performance in the Super Bowl, but their performance throughout the playoffs and the regular season, and it's just and we'll talk about this in the second half of the show. We're going to have Gary come on, and we'll get his thoughts on this. But I think you'd be hard pressed to find a worse season in Giants history than this one, given the record, given the public humiliation of going through Hard Knocks in the Saquon ordeal, and then directly helping the Eagles win a Super Bowl. Um, I don't. You'd be very hard pressed to find a worse. I'm so glad the season's over because this season was this was about as bad as you can get. And there have been seasons where I've been angry. This one I wasn't even really angry. I was just so I was apathetic. It got to the point where I just get this over with because this is terrible. It's the 100th, and again I keep saying it, the 100th anniversary. Too, throw that on top, starting with those uniforms and going through this
Oh
whole
my God.
thing. It's just, the whole season was just bad.
If you want to look at historical reference points or similarities in time, in some ways this is now mimicking the early 80s. The problem is there was one slight difference. So in 81, the Giants make the playoffs. LT's rookie year, they still had Gary Jeter, this Brad Van Pelt, Carson, all those guys. They make the playoffs. They win a playoff game. 82, we have the strike gets involved. The Giants win 4 games that season. If you take the strike out of the situation and assume we played a full 16-game season, that team still seemed kind of it was a little off. So you could think that was probably somewhere between a 6 and 8 win team, maybe. In 82, they won 4 out of 9 games that year. And then in 83, we did a coaching change, 82 into 83, and the wheels came off and we won 3 games. So in many ways, it's very similar. It's a 9-win season. Then you had a losing season, but there was some reasons why, and so you might be able to get. And then there was a tanking season in 83.
Yeah, but I don't see the similarities because those teams had foundational pieces like Lawrence Taylor and Phil Simms, and then of course Bill Parcells was the head coach. I don't
True,
see
I give you
I
that,
don't see unless
but
something drastically changes, this is way worse than that. So
and I can see that, but here's where I'm going to disagree. Phil Simms was not a foundational piece.
no, but he
They
became one. We
right,
don't even have a quarter. We
but
don't
you
even have a
didn't.
quarterback on the roster right now.
I understand that, but going into 84, you didn't know that. They didn't
Right.
know that. They looked for
Right.
somebody else. So yes, in reality, it worked out to being that he ultimately was the guy, but
Are
they
you
did know.
suggesting Tommy DeVito is our next Phil Simms?
No, I'm still going to suggest, and this will be again somewhere else. I still believe that player is on another team currently in the NFL right now. I
Right.
still think we're going to get a veteran quarterback. But anyway,
Right.
that being said, part of this whole show that we're planning to do is just to line up what the Giants have coming up free agency wise, not who they're going to go after with other teams. This is strictly the Giants roster and who's a free agent and kind of which, because there's different
Mhm.
tiers, whether you're an exclusive rights, meaning you can't sign with somebody else unless the Giants rescind their rights to this player completely. You can't sign with anybody.
Right.
And then there's the traditional free agents, which we'll talk about the transition and franchise tag things, which I'm going to say I doubt we have anybody, but
No,
we'll
no,
get to
no.
that.
There's nobody there.
But
No, there's
before we do that, you just took a drink. Yours is in a glass.
well,
I don't know what you have.
I have first of all, the glass is more important. It's my Super Bowl 25
Oh, nice.
commemorative with the New York Post on the back. Super. So I had to bring this out
Oh,
since it's the end of the Super Bowl, and I've got a Brooklyn IPA. So
nice. I'm going with a Beach Light Lager by Fam's Brewing, which is actually they also own a series of Italian pizza joints called Famulares down here. They're out of Charleston. And I'm just gonna so you know that I'm actually drinking it. Pop that thing open. But so let's begin. We'll start with the most important position, free agency wise. Let's start with quarterback. The Giants have 3 quarterbacks in this season. Once we got rid of Daniel Jones, there were still 3. We had Drew Lock, you Tim Boyle, and you had Tommy DeVito.
right.
As the season ends, every single one of those players became free agents or will become free agents when the league year starts. Tommy DeVito is the only one that's an exclusive rights free agents. Thoughts on that grouping?
Yeah, so there's the Giants have a lot of free agents. Only 4 of them are exclusive rights free agents, which means if they're tendered, as John said earlier, they can't go anywhere. So they're basically they'll sign the tender and they'll be back cheap. And we have no restricted free agents. Again, I'm basing this off of over the cap site and Spotrac site. So and they both seem to be they both had the same list. So I'm assuming this is correct. So and on that list, DeVito is a exclusive rights free agent. I think you and I are on the same page. They're not going to resign Boyle and very unlikely to resign Locke, right? You would think.
I can't see the only way I could see maybe Boyle comes back is if we don't sign anybody from another team, free agent wise. You go to the draft, we get one drafted quarterback. You probably then assume that DeVito has been re-signed, and thus you would need a third quarterback. So maybe Boyle comes in as the third guy. I still think they would probably go and find somebody else. So at this point, I can't imagine Locke or Boyle being on in their plans at all.
And if Boyle is out there, they don't need to sign him
Right, right.
for a while.
You can
So
wait till
they can
camp
wait
for that.
until the draft is settled. And so I'm operating under the assumption the Giants are going to sign a veteran and draft a quarterback at some point. That's how I'm operating. So that's why one of the reasons why I don't now I think there's a small chance they could bring back Drew Lock. I wouldn't. I don't know what their thinking is in terms of having another camp arm. I don't think it would help Locke to come back here either. So I think DeVito's a no-brainer in the sense not that DeVito may not even be on this roster next year, but he's as cheap as they come. They need camp arms at the very least. They did keep him on the 53-man roster, so I'm assuming somebody in the building likes him to a certain degree. So I just see DeVito being tendered, coming back real cheap. They'll sign somebody else in free agency, and we'll handle that for another show. And then Boyle, like you said, maybe they need a camp arm, a fourth camp arm, but if they can't get him back, they'll just get somebody else. So
Yeah.
that's where I am. So right out of that group, I only see DeVito. Oh, so we're at a stage right now. I don't think this has ever happened as long as I've been a Giants fan, where no quarterback is under contract, and when free agency starts, we only really are going to have like one guy technically on the roster, DeVito. That's where we're at.
And I think it's pretty. I mean, besides the fact that he's exclusive rights free agent, I think it was pretty obvious though when Shane made a comment the other day. We have DeVito still on the roster, so they're kind of counting on that he will be one of the arms. You kind of have to say it anyway, but I think if you knew you weren't even going to bother with this guy, you wouldn't say anything. You would just be like,
Right.
we're looking at a bunch of stuff. They've specifically said they have him. I can't see Drew Lock for the basic reason is his cost would be too much for a guy you really, unless you're bringing him back as the bridge guy, unless they change their mind because of the Indianapolis game and they want to use him as the bridge, which I can't see how you could possibly after last year do that. He was
Well, but what
pretty
a
bad.
stupid thing to play lock down the stretch once DeVito got healthy again. I mean, just it's again, to me that's just more stupidity in handling the roster. You have a losing season. Your Locke's probably not coming back. We're assuming he's not coming back. So why would you even wait? Why wouldn't you give those snaps to DeVito just to see if there's anything there? So I don't like how they handled even the end of last year.
I suspect, quite honestly, and to be clear, if anybody went back and watched the videos, you and I, but I'll say for myself, I won't speak for you.
Right,
As we were leading up to whether or not Daniel Jones would or would not still be the quarterback, I kept saying, if you pull him, you should just jump to DeVito.
right.
Don't bother with Locke. Just jump to DeVito and go because he brings a little bit of a spark to the crowd and people like that and whatever. And you're already planning for next year. They did.
He
Then
got
they
hurt.
had to go. But what I think happened, though, is it really did look like, and then our guest Adriana, when she was on, mentioned it too. It kind of looked like the Giants quit in that game against Tampa Bay, and there very well could be an in locker room piece where guys were like, "Wait a minute, Locke's the better quarterback. Why did you play this guy?"
I don't care,
Oh,
but I
I
don't.
agree with you, but let's keep in mind we know what organization we're dealing with, and they do
Yeah,
care about that kind of stuff. So either way, it didn't matter. Locke stunk most of the year.
right. And DeVito played like crap before he got hurt. But I just would I get a read if DeVito's dog shit, then let's find out. Let's find out for sure last year. But now you're going to another. Right. He's probably right. We're spending too much time on this. He'll be in camp. Whether he survives camp this year remains to be seen. The Giants may or may not carry three quarterbacks again. If they treat it like they did last year, I don't know what the point of keeping DeVito on the roster is, though. Especially if they draft a quarterback. I don't see. I would put DeVito on the practice squad. And if someone signs him, so what? So that's
Yeah,
what.
I,
So.
I, I mean, I do think, I think you're right. I do think we're going to get a quarterback. You say free agency. I feel like it's going to be a trade, and I
Well,
think
when I
we're
say free agency, I mean
both.
I
Okay,
mean
so either one of those two. Yeah,
veterans.
so
Yeah,
from another
yeah,
team. I also think we'll draft one.
yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if we drafted two, but I think you're probably more likely to just get another third guy who's a fringe veteran, a guy who's kind of been around. And if you had to play him, because once you get to three, you pretty much have given up on your season anyway.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
so we're gonna kind of do these. We're gonna bounce around by position and need, though. I
Yeah,
think.
there's no running backs that are free agents, so the running back room we don't even have to discuss. There's nothing to discuss at running back.
So let's go. Since we started with quarterback,
Oh,
running back is set. Let's jump to wide receiver because
yeah,
right there we do have a number of free agents, and it's not just that we have a number of free agents. That also leaves us with some questions on those who are still here.
yeah. I'm. I don't want to sound like a broken record as we go through this list. There is not. if you want the Cliff Notes version, there aren't a lot of guys on this list that I'm interested in bringing back, and I don't think the Giants are going to be interested in bringing a lot of these guys back. And it's an indicative of the quality of the roster that we're looking at this number of people. I haven't counted these up, but what are we talking about? 20 free agents, probably if you add them all up. I'd have to add them all up, but there's not a lot here. Darius Slayton is the obvious headliner, and I'm not even sure he wants to come back. I'm not sure the Giants are going to be able to bring him back if they want to. And I don't, and you and I have talked about this over and over again. Our listeners are going to, we're not even sure they should bring him back. The other guy, I actually think the more interesting guy there is Smith Marset, the returner, since he did such a good job. And the other receiver is Gunner, another returner who got hurt. And I mean, personally, I think Smith Marset to me looked like the better. They both returned kicks for touchdowns for the Giants, so we
Right.
both have done that. One was the previous year, and the other last year. But I would bring back Smith Marset as long as he's cheap as a returner. Slayton, I would make an offer to, but I wouldn't. The kind of offer I would make to him wouldn't be the kind of offer he's probably going to accept. And so to personally me, I would only bring Rex Smith Marset of the three guys.
I don't go out of my way for any of them, and Slayton's the first one I don't even offer any money to.
No, you don't
Uh,
even offer him none. Okay,
it's an insult if you offer him super low, right?
that's true.
To him, and with his connections to other players in the locker
Right.
room, you. I'm not going to repeat a line I did before because it was funny and it happened when it
Yes.
happened about that. I think now more of like the movie The Other Guys and Mark Wahlberg. He wanted to be a peacock. He needed to be able to spread his wings. He needed to be able to show his feathers. Slayton needs to go somewhere else. If you think you're that good, and if you think you could be better with another quarterback, please do, because you have been good for the Giants, but that's also putting it up against nothing. And you have not been part of a winning culture here at all. You haven't changed anything yourself. You've been a part of a number of almost plays throughout your career. I'm not bashing you. I hope you go
Right.
have a decent career, but I'm not wasting my time on you just because, oh, we might not have some depth. Who cares? What has it meant to us with him being here? No, let him go. I'm with you on the
The
Smith
only
Marset.
question is how much has the quarterback set him back? But I'm kind of with you. I'm just the one mistake I think the Giants would make is if they offered him a big contract. Like if they overreact to the fact that they don't have a lot of wide receivers under contract right now, and they say, well, we got to bring him back. He's been a good team player. He's been a good presence in the locker room, and they overpay for him. And because he's one of those wide receivers that he does just enough to make you go, but then he disappears. And he did that again last year. Again, but you can say, how much is that as the quarterback? I could see him be one of those guys, though, that he goes to another team. Like we've had a few of them lately that goes to another team and has a much better career with another team. And that's
He
one of the
might.
reasons why I think he might want to leave too. If the Eagles desperately needed a wide receiver, I'm sure he'd like to go join Saquon. I hope he doesn't, but I just wouldn't offer him a lot of money. I think I would offer him a contract. I think, but like you said, you got to be careful it's not insulting. But I hope they don't. I don't hope they don't like offer him like frontline starter money. He's not worth that.
No, and again, you once again blew your opportunity. The Giants could have moved him, and I don't care what depth we had at the time. It didn't matter. You knew you weren't
It
playing
was
for
stupid. It was
victories.
another stupid thing not to trade
Should have
him.
should
I
have
don't care
traded
if they
him.
got a sixth round draft pick for him. It was dumb because he didn't even do anything down the stretch
You
for them.
After a while, you can sit there and say, yeah, the fifth round pick, a sixth round pick, they don't mean it. An individual fifth or sixth round pick, you're right, might not mean anything. But when you have two fifth or sixth round picks or three fifth or sixth round picks, you have more chances that you're finding one of those guys late. And if you have a process, which we now just love to tell everybody, we have a process, then you find guys that fit your system because the Eagles do it. The
Right. Well,
49ers
we've
do
got
it.
fifth rounders starting on this team right now. Now that again, that might be indicative of the quality of the
Could
roster,
be, but
but But we've got guys on defense and offense that were drafted in the fifth round that are on this team. So don't tell me those picks don't matter. But we should move along. But I think we're on board with that. We might get some blowback on Slayton because I'm sure he has fans out there. And I'm a little bit higher than John is on him. I think he's going to get a better offer someplace else. If the Giants re-sign him to a reasonable deal, I would feel a little bit better about the depth going into training camp. But I don't want him starting again. I don't want him. I don't want him being the starting wide receiver outside opposite of Malik Neighbors because we've seen that and it's not good enough.
Yeah, I just don't think he brings enough. He's not the kind of difference maker and difference in your grouping, like a physically different player to offset what you have in Neighbors. And then we haven't even talked about Hyatt because he's, not really part of this discussion, but a guy who needs to develop. And if he doesn't, this is his year. He either does or doesn't this year. And then you've got Wan'Dale Robinson. We need somebody who's a little different. You need that bigger guy who can make the third down physical catches,
Right.
who can kind of basketball it to a degree. We don't have a guy like that. All our receivers are Neighbors and down as far as size
Right.
goes. You got a Bryce Ford Wheaton doesn't count. He doesn't play on offense. We
He doesn't
never see
play.
him on offense.
Right.
So I'm with you. So we're basically on
So
the same page.
do you bring back one of the returners if they're cheap?
If Smith Marset is cheap, I like what he brought to the kick return game more than Gunnar
Done it.
did, because Gunnar is very he's more of he's a slightly more explosive Phil McConkey. Like, you can count on him to catch the ball. He's probably not going to turn it over, but more than likely he's not really going to break
Believe
much
it
of
or
anything.
not, Gunner's got a lot of fumbles in his career. Not with the
Well, there is
Giants.
that. He did. You're right.
Yeah,
He did.
not with the Giants, but
So
yeah,
Smith Marset, I think, would be cheaper too, to keep him, because I mean, this guy's never been. He's
yeah.
bounced around.
But you
So
would you would so actually so my bottom line on wide receiver is I'm actually more interested in keeping the returner. I won't lose any sleep over if they don't bring
right.
any of them back, but I'm more interested in getting the returner. So far, none of the quarterbacks, unless you're counting DeVito with the exclusive rights free agent, and the only receiver I'm really looking to is maybe one of the returners. So and
Right,
no running
right.
backs up. So then that brings us to tight end.
Tight end, we only have Manhurts is the only free agent out there.
Yeah, and I could see him coming back if they have a veteran minimum because he's a blocking tight end. But again, I think he did a decent job in that role. He had a touchdown, but he's not a receiver. And I would offer him a contract to bring him back as a camp body, but this is a pretty good class at tight end in the draft. So I wouldn't lose any sleep over. I think Bellinger actually played better than he did the previous year once he got a chance to play this year. And everything depends on if Theo Johnson's Liz Frank injury is going to be okay. That's not getting talked about enough. But Manhurts to me, I thought was a reliable blocking tight end. He's a guy that I could see them re-signing as long as he's cheap.
See, and I agree with what you're saying, but for me, in a field that's pretty deep draft wise,
Right.
I'd rather go get a young guy that I can control the costs even longer, who could maybe be more than just a blocker. Because when you start wasting too much money on situational
Right,
players,
right,
that gets to be costly when your depth is so thin in so many other areas.
right.
So I think I could see him coming back because he has that Dayball Bills connection before. I just don't think he brings a lot, and I was actually surprised they really didn't use him much as I thought they would. Um,
I
I
think he
thought
got the snaps. I think
he
he got
did.
the snaps, but you didn't notice him because he was primarily being a blocking role. The only thing that makes me nervous is we're gonna say this a lot. We'd get this in the draft. We get this guy in the draft. We only have so many
There's
draft
only
picks,
so many
and
picks.
if we're gonna trade for a quarterback like you think we might, we're not gonna have a lot of draft draft picks. So that's the only thing that you and I have talked about this before, that you kind of like to go into the draft not having to draft somebody because you have a glaring hole. So I would bring back Manhurts without like bonus money. So you can cut them if
Sure,
right
sure.
away. And there's no like there's no dead money
So
there.
you're looking like
Probably.
a vet min kind of
Yeah.
contract, and yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 So then that brings us to the offensive line, which we do have a few. Chris Hubbard, Greg Van Roten, which I think is probably the bigger one to talk about, and then Aaron Stinney. Both Van Roten and Stinney can also play center if needed. They are listed as guards. Hubbard is more of a swing tackle. Quite frankly, I think we can pick up pretty much almost anything that would be equal to Chris Hubbard at a much cheaper rate. So I think Hubbard's probably going to be a guy that we don't bother even trying to bring back.
I don't think I'm bringing back any of them. Maybe one of them is a camp body. Stinney is kind of a decent um backup because like you said he can play center and he can play guard, but none of them are like, part of me is depends on what the new offensive line coach really thinks of Neil um as a guard. So if they're thinking about Neil playing Neil as a guard, then I don't think I bring any of these guys back because then you bring in somebody to compete with Neil, a new veteran free agent, or a draft pick to compete with Neil at guard. And I think Van Roten's done. Hubbard was not good. And Stinney's a serviceable backup, but I just wonder if you like you said, can't we get cheaper there? Can't we get somebody in there that a draft pick or even even somebody we have on the roster like Kubis or something like that and get one of these younger guys that more playing time if they need it. So I personally I wouldn't bring any of those guys back. That's how I feel right now.
Van Roten's the one that I would consider because I almost want to. For me, the big question is Schmitz. It's
Hmm.
less about the guards and it's more about Schmitz. If we're going to have to replace Schmitz, if we don't think he's going to be the guy, and we don't know how the Giants feel about him, by the way, we can have our own opinions, and we know a size opinion that he hasn't really lived up to a lot of, his limitations in college have really shown through in the pros. I don't know how much of that is really around the fact that your offense has been so limited. It exposes players, their weaknesses become extremely exposed because you can't dictate anything to anybody. You're really reacting to everything being done to you, and that
Right.
does expose limitations. I think Van Roten's a guy, though, that I would want to be around if I want someone I know I can plug in at guard. I could plug him in at center. I could probably even throw him out at tackle in a game if I lost two people and know that he's going to know his assignments. But he's also 34,
Yeah.
35, something like that.
He's up there. And the other thing too, remember Schlotman they signed in free agency last year and he missed most of the year with an injury. He only came back at the very end of I think he only played it in the last game. Um, and Schlotman started a few games for the Vikings, and he was supposed to be the veteran backup insurance for Schmitz. And he's still under contract. So that's one of the reasons. And I would not be shocked to see the Giants actually add another center someplace in the draft or free agency, depending on how they really feel about Schmitz. So that's one of the reasons again, if they do bring back Van Roten, like you said, it would have to be because they consider him maybe a backup center too. But he's up there. I
Yeah,
mean,
he's up there in age. I think he's 34 or 35.
yeah,
So then to me, the big question about not necessarily these three guys, right? I don't mean let's talk about them individually and have questions about them. The questions for me are this. You brought up one name already. We're kind of pegging him in an area that we haven't been told whether they will or will not try him, and that's Neil
and
at
same
guard.
with Josh Azudu too.
And that's the other guy where I was going to
Right.
go with because Josh Azudu, I think, is a serviceable guard if he could actually get to play there. He's got athletic,
they don't want him to play there.
which is
No,
weird that you would
no,
draft a
no.
guy as a guard and keep throwing him out at tackle, and no matter how much he fails, you don't seem to put him back at guard.
Now I will
Now,
say this: when was at guard too, he wasn't great in pass protection. So we have to come to terms with the fact that both Neal and Azudu might not be NFL caliber players. So, but part of me says, well, let's find out. Van Roten's not going to help. We're not going to the Super Bowl next year. We're not going to be in the playoffs next year. Let's find out about Zudu and Neil once and for all. Let's stop messing with them at tackle. Both Neil and Zudu can't handle tackle, both of them.
right.
So let's see if they can play guard. And if they can handle a backup guard, like if they can play just as well as Stinney, then you're at least you're getting rid of Stinney and you're getting rid of Van Roten and you just get a little younger and stronger there, and then we'll see. So
And then the other thing is Kubis. What do the Giants see in Kubis? Where do
Kubas
they?
might be a better player than Evan Neal, which is sad.
Yeah,
Think about
yeah.
that. Think about that. So I mean, that's where we're at. But would you
So
be shocked? Would you personally be shocked if Kubis is starting in the NFL at guard in 2 or 3 years and Neal is out of the league? I wouldn't. I
no,
don't
not
think.
the way that it's gone because Neil has shown so very little
Yeah,
with so much more opportunity. Like I mean,
yeah.
here you were
He can't
a
stay healthy either.
you're a and that's the other problem. This is the thing that I think people need to really realize, right? Like and just to take a quick time out to this piece of it. I know everybody's jumping on talking how great Howie Roseman is and this and that. And look what he did with Mekhi Beckham. Okay, Mekhi Beckham was a huge reach. The Eagles were not counting on him really being a whole lot. They were hoping to get some out of him. It worked out in their favor. I could see us doing that, and he would have been injured within week one. You know what I
No,
mean?
that's
It's
what I mean. They get some bad like
he's had a
mojo
lot
with
of
this team.
Becton had a lot of injuries, and they were lower body injuries, and he had a lot of weight. Neil has a lot of ankle foot issues,
Yeah.
and that's scary for a guy his size, but he's not the guy that I'm most worried about now. I'm worried about Andrew Thomas, the guy we pay a ton of money
Oh
to,
yeah. Oh
who
yeah.
also
That's
has
a
a
big
lot of
problem right now.
injuries.
Yeah, because he makes way too much money too. So
So
yeah,
would
we don't want.
would it be fair to say, would you agree that offensive line might be a sneakier need than a lot of people are thinking right now?
Yes, but I don't know if this team, and this is going to piss off a lot of people, especially when I said about the lines being more important. Um, I don't know if they can afford to address the line in a big way. I think they need to get a right guard to compete with Neal. You cannot assume Neal can handle anything right now. I think they're okay with Illuminor. I think they're okay with Runyon. Not great.
Who
They're
didn't
not
have a great
terrible, but
year and he
but
got
not
hurt.
terrible. If Andrew Thomas stays healthy, they're okay at that. The question mark is Schmitz and right guard. So, but the big question, kind of what you're talking about, is can Thomas stay healthy? If you tell me Thomas is playing 17 games next year, then I actually don't think the line is terrible because I can live with Illuminor and Thomas at tackle. I
Sure.
think you can win games with that combination, and I think Runyon is a plus player. Not great, but he's a plus player. What do you have in Schmitz? And then you got to do something at right guard because you can. And Cy talked the same thing. You got to replace Roten. He's just he can play in the league, but he's not a winning player. He's somebody you try to replace. So, but if Thomas gets hurt again, John, yes, to answer your question, it would be we got to get a swing tackle. The one thing the team needs on the offensive line is a swing tackle that's a true swing tackle, not Izudu, not Hubbard. You want Illuminor staying on the right side. We need a swing tackle, or we need a really good right tackle that makes Illuminor become the swing tackle.
Right. Because Luminar also has guard ability.
Yes,
So you could slide him into guard.
Illuminar could play right guard, and then if somebody got hurt, he could go back out to tackle. So you either got to get a right tackle or you got to get a guard in there, one or the other. So we need at least one good offensive lineman to start, and then the other questions is depth at that point. It depends
Right.
on how you feel about Schlotman and Kubis, Zudu, Neal, that kind of thing.
So if we move to the other side of the ball, free agency wise, if we switch to the
There's not a
defense,
lot there.
it's kind of interesting when you look at it, right? Defensive line, we've got Armon Watts is the only guy that's a free agent. Giants aren't
He's
bringing him back.
hurt, and he got seriously hurt at the end of
Yeah,
the year. So I don't
he's
think we can even count on him. I think they never said specifically what he did to his knee, but it looked bad. I'm assuming it's an ACL, and if so, he's not playing next year. So I
yeah.
don't even think you put Watt. He may not even be re-signed. Before you get in that, let's just say the three other exclusive rights free agents are Tamon Fox, Deontay Johnson, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Devad Wilson. Um, and the only of one of those I think is a no-brainer is Deontay Johnson because I think he could actually be a starter on this team at inside linebacker. Tamon Fox has hung around a long time. He's a try-hard guy. He's a good guy, but he doesn't do anything for you. I could see him bringing back because he's cheap and he's a camp body, but I think he would get. I think those two linebackers get tendered. I don't know enough about the corner. He didn't play enough.
I would have to say that they're not going to bother with. I mean,
Yeah.
again, they are exclusive rights free agents. They're going to be very cheap if you tender them. It's not going to eat up much of any of the cap money if you want to tender all the. DeVito might be the one that's a little bit more based on the position, but I can't. I don't even know how that works money wise, so I'm not going to guess. But they're none of them are going to take up much. I agree. I think the linebackers would get tendered. But now, if you deal with the exclusive rights free agents, Watts we just talked about on the defensive line, right away the Giants' defensive line is a noticeable need. Period.
Oh
We
God, yeah.
we have
Well, not
Dexter
only just
Lawrence.
one, they need at least two guys, and I expect very good draft for defensive linemen. We're going to draft a defensive lineman. If they don't, then Shane should be fired. But they need a defensive lineman, and they need to bring one in free agency. And I would let Nunez Roches go. He makes too much money and doesn't bring anything to you. I would let him go. Um, and I don't know if you wanted to get into this. The other guy I would let go is probably the kicker Gano. I would probably let him go. Or he'd have to agree to a much cheaper contract.
He's
Uh,
way too expensive for
but
a
there, but
losing
yeah,
team.
but there's nobody on the defensive line that's a free agent other than Watts, and Watts is hurt, and I think he's probably going to be out next year because of his injury anyway. And the Giants have some. Let's just say this: to be fair, to be a little positive, and I'm going to be more positive than I'm sure you're going to be. They do have some young guys that I would not discount and could be a factor as a rotational piece. So I think Elijah Garcia showed some things down the stretch. I think Elijah Chapman played better as the season went along. I don't want him starting. Elijah Garcia, I probably don't want starting. Um, what's interesting, I mean, Davidson before he got hurt was actually making some plays. He had some really good games at times. Riley did what he did. Jordan Riley did what he did earlier for the Giants. There were some games where you were like, there might be something there. He's not a pass rusher, but there might be. So there are some guys there that can still be part of a rotation, but there's no one that's obviously that you want to count on and say this is the guy that we want next to Dexter Lawrence a full 17 games. And so I think they've got to take advantage of the deep draft class and get. I would not be shocked if they if their first pick in the second round. I mean, their second round pick is a defensive lineman, the high pick, because it's a deep draft class.
I agree. Back to what you were talking about, Nunez Roaches, if they cut him, would save about 3.6 million on the cap. I think that's a no-brainer. Even though we don't need a ton of cap, like we have cap space, so it's not like we're clearing it because you have to. I think you just do it because
He didn't do anything.
what has he brought to this team?
He's not brought nothing to. I mean, he's a good guy in the locker room, but
But
great.
and I'm tired of our locker room being full of good guys. I'm like, it's meant nothing
I
on
mean,
the
I
field.
like the guy personally, but he just doesn't do anything for you. So
Gano that you mentioned would clear 3.1 million off the cap.
yeah,
But again, why do we I hated it when we gave him the contract. He's a
yeah,
good kicker. He's a very good kicker. But you don't risk a bunch of money on a kicker on a team that is not playoff guaranteed or probably playoff guaranteed or Super Bowl contender. Those are things you do when you're a winning organization, and a game here or there might mean the difference in the Super Bowl. But if
right.
you're a team you're looking at a difference of maybe, well, we might win 5 games or we might win 7 games. You don't spend $4 or $5 million on a kicker. And by the way, he got hurt again, and it totally effed us in week 2. But that's not important. Um,
Yeah, the
Daniel,
other thing I'll mention too is so I mentioned this on an earlier episode. The Giants normally re-sign the bulk of their practice squad players, and they did not do that this year. They only re-signed 5 guys, and two of them were defensive linemen and two of them were centers. So I don't ever recall them doing that. Usually again they have 13, 14 guys they resign. They only resigned five, and one of them was the European kicker who doesn't count. He's like a freebie. So it was Casey Rogers and a guy they picked up late that I know nothing about, this Ross Blacklock. So again, so I'm
He's
just
a
throwing, I'm
he was
just
a
throwing,
defensive tackle out of Texas when he came out.
right.
Was like a second or third round draft pick.
Yeah,
He
he was a
was
high
yeah,
pick, but I
yeah,
don't know like how he's done but what's interesting is
nothing.
he was one of the guys, they got him late and they said they saw enough that they brought him back and let a lot of other guys just go. Like to give you an idea, like they did not re-sign the linebacker Coughlin, who's been around here forever. They just finally said, no, we don't want Carter Coughlin. They said we're not bringing him back, but they brought back Blacklock. So I just throw that out
I,
that they dressed
I think that's a
DL and up
salary.
center so
Yeah,
far.
I think that's a salary thing though, because Coughlin's been in the league and on the roster a number of years. He would get more money. He automatically
Oh yeah,
gets
he
more
would.
money.
Yeah, he would. He
Now,
would. But
one of the things though to say to your point though is I think some of it though kind of played itself out with how many of these guys were actually on the roster at the end of the season. We had a number of guys filling in for injured players that were on the roster. So they were no longer on the practice squad. We actually brought them up. And I think some of those guys, because I'm looking at who's counting on as far as over the cap, and you've got guys like Art Green, Casey Rogers, Dante Miller's on there. What you just brought up, Blacklock, you got Anthony Johnson Jr., Corey Durden, Elijah Garcia. All these guys are counting on the cap for us as being as part of the team.
right.
So there is money. Now there's one other player we sticking to just I'll go in order because I want to kind of cut this a little bit short because we're going to have
Right,
Gary
right, because
join us
Gary's
really
gonna
quick.
be on it and stuff. Yeah.
So really we got a mismatch of players left over. So I'm going to just kind of jump around. Isaiah Simmons, linebacker, defensive back
He's
combo.
yeah, I wouldn't think they would bring him back, but I just saw it's like he's trying to recruit. Who was he trying to help recruit? There were some free agents out there. He was trying to convince somebody to join the Giants.
Which is
So
weird because I thought didn't Jordan Renaud just do, or was either Jordan or it was Durden that basically just did, or Duggan, I mean, that just did an article about the fact that they thought Isaiah would probably be moving on. That
I would
he
think so too. And I would think so too, because for him too, because they didn't really use him. But I just saw that he was helping. God, I wish I remember who it was. He was trying to convince some free agency to join the Giants along with another Giant player. So I was like, well, that's odd. Does he think he's coming back? So all right, I'm going to operate under the assumption he's not coming back because they didn't really use him.
yeah,
But I would not be shocked if they brought him back, but I don't know why he would want to come back because he wasn't happy with his playing time. We know that.
right,
He was
right.
not happy
Well,
with
and
his play.
he just doesn't produce. He had the block field goal, but I mean that's just an unbelievably athletic play. It's you can't say that was a great football play. It's a great athletic play. He jumps over the line, he's able to catch the ball, boom, and he's gone. Defensively, you just never know what you get with him because he's not a true linebacker. He's definitely not a defensive back. It is the question that's dogged him since he came out of Clemson. Is he more athlete than football player? And what do you do with him? And the Cardinals obviously thought the same thing. They shipped him to the Giants.
He's a frustrating player because there are games where he makes a play or two, and then he has another game where he's just awful. He'll miss a tackle, he'll take the wrong angle. He's one of those guys who's more an athlete than a football player. So, but we should group these quickly. So the linebackers in the unrestricted free agents. We talked about the exclusive rights. I'd bring back Deontay Johnson. I think Deontay could actually start on this team. Tamon Fox, I'd probably tender him just for a camp body, but I don't want him making the team. But the true unrestricted free agents, Azeez Ojulari, same category as Slayton. They should have traded him for a seventh rounder if they could have. Patrick Johnson, I don't see any reason to bring him back. Matthew Adams, they might bring back because he's a special teams player. Ty Summers wasn't terrible, did at least he flew around the football field and he tried hard. So I could see if he comes back cheap, they might bring back Ty Summers. But again, there's nobody there to me in the linebacker, and I put Simmons in that sort of linebacker slash
Yeah,
DB.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, of all of those guys, I'm not bringing back Ojulari, and I don't think Ojulari wants to come here. Ojulari to me would be stupid for him to come back here because he's going to be stuck behind Kayvon again. He's going to be stuck behind Burns, and he's had a bad run here. If I'm Ojulari, I'm going someplace else. Um, Patrick Johnson does nothing for me. Matthew Adams is just a special teamer. I could go either way with that. I don't really care. Ty Summers to me is the one guy that I thought he did enough that I would at least want him back in camp, but only if he's veteran minimum. He's the only guy that of that group that I was interested.
Yeah, I wouldn't even worry about any of those guys
Yeah,
right away. Like you get through free agency a ways,
yeah,
maybe we sign one of them for like,
yeah.
hey, they're like, listen, I'll come in at vet mid. I want to stay with the team. Great, I'll do that deal. Other than that, I wait and then I wait even maybe through the draft. And if they sign with somebody else, they sign with somebody else. None of those guys are irreplaceable from the back end of your roster. You can find undrafted free agents that could do some of the stuff that they could do just from a heart standpoint. So I'm not
Right,
overly
and remember,
concerned.
you already have McFadden and Muasau and Okereke and not Deontay Johnson.
Right.
So it's a numbers issue too. And then plus you're going to have undrafted rookie free agents. You might have another draft pick. So yeah, like you said, they need another outside edge guy, somebody for depth and maybe to push. And that's why we've talked about Abdul Carter.
Oh,
He could be our first pick. Um,
absolutely.
to replace Thibodeau in a year or so. But yeah, I didn't see anybody there. And then in the DB area, I didn't see it. I mean, Dory Jackson, I don't want him back. Greg Stroman is a kind of a nickel guy that only played a handful of games. And the only other guy that's really probably the headliner, people are going to say Slayton, the headliner of this entire class is Jason Pinnock, a safety who didn't, I don't think he had an interception, and I only think he had made one or two pass defenses. And if you're not going to resign Xavier McKinney and you're not going to resign Julian Love, I don't see how the Giants are going to make a big push to resign Jason Pinnock unless he comes cheap. If you're not going to sign those other guys, why would you bring back Pinnock to a big money? And Pinnock might think have a inflated view of himself. So I
And
would
I
like
think
Pinnock back, but only at a very manageable contract.
and I could see them maybe moving a guy. I could see maybe a Hawkins maybe moving to safety. Um, I think you're more likely to draft a guy, pick up a vet free agent
Yes,
who's cheaper than who'll be
and
cheaper than Pinnock
who has a knack for making plays on the football.
and
Who
who's and a leader. So
yes.
you might want a leader because you've got youth. You've got Newbin who needs guidance because what everything we thought he was going to be as far as playing the ball, he wasn't. He was a pretty good hitter. He was more physical than I was expecting, but he didn't play the ball the way he did at Minnesota. And then you've got Belton, who's kind of in between both. He's a bit of a hitter. He can play the ball from time to time, but he also misses a ton of tackles.
Yeah,
And
he's a frustrating player too, but the one thing about him that I like is he has a knack for making plays. He's one of the few guys that we have in the secondary that seems to be around the ball a lot, either causing or recovering fumbles or getting his hands on the football, either breaking up a pass or getting an interception. So I would like to see Dane Belton again, once or for all. Let's find out what Dane Belton really
yes,
is. So I would not be shocked to see if you said earlier his offensive line is sneaky need. I would not be shocked to see if one of our first few veteran free agent signings is a safety. I wouldn't be shocked about that.
yeah.
Not a big contract, but just a guy to come in and like you said, a leader, someone who has the knack fits this defense. Again, I'd like to bring back Jason Pinnock. I just think he's going to get a better offer someplace else.
So I think we'll wrap it up because I know we're going to be bringing Gary in here, who's actually getting ready to come in. We've got the special teams. You got Jamie Gillian and you got Casey Kreider. Both of those are free agents, and quite frankly, I'm okay if we don't bring back either one.
I thought Jamie got better last year in 2023. I thought his 2024 season was a little bit disappointing. I don't think he's a bad punter, but he's not even kind of a mid-tier guy. He's got a strong leg, so he's a guy that could really become a better punter. But when you compare his net and his gross punting average, it's not good.
Yeah.
It's not even mid-tier. Now he has gotten better with ball placement. His inside the punting numbers have gotten markedly better. So I could see them bringing him back, but again, I would if he has inflated view of himself, I would just bring in another punter. I think you
Yeah,
need,
and for me it's cost. So I don't want to
yeah,
sound like I think he's a bad punter. It's
yeah.
just we're mid-tier in cap space. We're way better than we have been, but that's still a joke considering how bad we are. We should be way at the top of cap space considering just, the fact that our roster is so thin, but we're not.
All right.
We're mid-tier. So what
Question. Oh,
let's
do we have
take
Gary on?
yeah, so let's take a break real quick. We'll bring Gary on and maybe we'll finish up free agency. We could talk Gary
Yeah.
a little bit
I
about
just
the
want to,
players.
yeah, because I want to
And then we'll
finish up and say, is there any guy on here you want to bring back? And we'll get to that.
we'll get to that. So we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back. All right, so we're back, and Eric, we have a guest.
It's Gary,
Hey
the
guys,
guy who saved BBI.
I
So for
did.
people,
And here I am in BBI Central where I manually approve all posts. So you know that I'm
Nice.
busy working. I can't take a break, but I'm just gonna, whatever.
and
Uh,
for all of you people out there who say we have this hamster on the wheel,
that's right.
look at the wheel.
This is it. We're
Look
very
at
high tech here. This is very high tech. We don't no other Giants website has the kind of technology that we have here today. So I just
So
wanted to.
we had a question this week from Ray in Arlington. He wanted to know when the website started, and when I had to go back, and the earliest post that I could find was May 1995, and it made me wonder when we knew we were going to have you come on. When I can't remember the year that
It
you.
was I know exactly the year because
Okay.
it was the year that I got married
Oh,
in 2007.
okay.
So I came on, I want to say in March of that year or thereabouts, where I got access to the stuff and I worked on getting things up and running. Because I remember I was on my honeymoon, like, I would peek in and look and see how things were working. And then we went live with it in September-ish. It was in somewhere in mid-September. So I remember that once we switched to the new website, that we went on like a big tear of winning games, and then we eventually won the Super Bowl. So that
Yeah,
was
I was going to say, what a year to do it because that was a.
that was some sort of crazy weird luck that went with starting the website. And
I would have sworn it was before 2007. So that's great that you remember that. Because I would have thought for sure it was even like as far back as 2000. So
Yeah, no,
that
that was well,
yeah.
I have data going back that I had saved some old posts, and there was a table in the database that had old posts but no or old threads but no comments on them.
All right.
But I never actually managed to integrate them into the site. Maybe if I do if we should do an upgrade of the corner sometime before, whenever. But if that ever happens, then I'll try and integrate some of those old posts, because we do have some old data that does go back to, I think it goes back to the late 90s.
Wow.
Because
Old
we
That
had
would
to,
be
stuff.
because
funny.
because 05, weren't we around in I'm not we, but with we were chatting in 05 about free agency and
Oh yeah,
the
no, the
clo
site was up. So the site started in, I want to say, 95.
It was
Uh,
95 and it was
and then the
run
corner
off.
came after that, and then there was the when you didn't have to log in. I
Right.
remember that. And so
Right.
people would just like say they like, I would post as Eric from BBI or
Yeah.
whatever, that kind of thing. And I didn't do that, but I'm just saying that you could do
I'm like,
that.
wait a minute.
It was but there was a that was a very crazy time. And then there was the login started in 2001 with the old site, the old Cold
Right.
Fusion site, which would go down. You would have JRun errors and all that kind of stuff that would break all the time. And then we started talking about it, I think, in 2006. You were looking at different people. I remember that at the time I had done Harry Carson's website, and so that was
Right.
that was a factor in my favor. And then you decide, oh yeah, why don't you do it? And so I managed to mostly recreate the site as it was, the corner forum format and whatever as it was
Hmm.
from before, using the existing data and that sort of thing. So it's
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on it because I want to talk football, but people don't realize how close over time BBI has come to not existing. And at the last moment, somebody like the cavalry has appeared over the hill to rescue the day. And the site first started when I was running it off a work server.
yeah,
And
no, I
I was
remember
told,
that.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
was told to get it off the work server because it was getting way more hits than the agency that I was working for. And then out of nowhere, a Giants fan came and saved me. He had his own firm, and there were a couple of guys like that before Gary that would show up and say, "I will host the site. I know you know nothing about computers and all this, and handle it." That's where Pete's Corner first started. The corner
Right.
forum used to be called Pete's Corner because the guy that did it was Pete. And then Gary, and again, I thought I was in trouble, and then Gary arrived on the scene, and Gary's been great. So there's always been somebody at the. It's almost like divine intervention. There's always been someone at the last minute when would tell my wife, "Yeah, this is it. We got to pull the plug." Somebody showed up and said, I'll help." So that's the story. And Gary's been here a long
Yeah,
time.
no, it's been a long run, and it's been, a lot of fun. I learned a lot of things. There was a lot of stressful moments. Uh, a lot of some,
The infamous hack
the
when someone.
hack, which was in like 2013. That was I mean, I honestly didn't know if I'd be able to fix it. I didn't
Yeah,
know what would happen after that. It was very touch and go, trying to
right.
figure out if things could be fixed or whatnot, and it's kind of crazy.
Yeah. We'll
But
have
we
to have a
did.
show someday that we talk to people. There have been a lot of people who have had suggestions about what to do with the website and why don't we do that. And there are reasons behind all of this. Gary and I
I think
have
that would
talked
be
about it.
great if we had like a big call or a big Zoom call, and we all
Yeah.
had like a little round table,
Yeah.
some of the bigger posters and people who have been on for a long time, and we just talked about, what we could do in the future, because I think a lot of people would be interested in that, and how we could do it. Or you get stuck after a while. I mean, I did the big upgrade of the main
Right.
site
Which was great.
this year, and so now it looks more like a somewhat modern site, and not something from 2013 anymore. But it's
Well, it
been.
fits. I mean, the Giants look like something from the 1920s, so
Oh man.
we were all set.
It's crazy.
So, John, we should get into football,
All
right?
right, let's
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
about football.
Let's
Yeah.
Talk
finish.
about very exciting.
We'll finish the free agency conversation that we had. So we covered who the Giants have for free agents. Of the free agents out there, guys like a DeVito, guys like Locke, Boyle, Aziz Ojolari. Is there anybody of that list that you're like, geez, I really want the Giants to bring that guy back? And I'll start with you, Eric, and then we'll go Gary. And what do you think, Eric?
Yeah,
Is there
Gary
some?
may not have the full list in front of him. So, but I would not be upset. I hate to say this, if we didn't re-sign any of them. Who I would like to bring back? I think DeVito's coming back just because he's going to be so cheap, and they need a camp arm. Um, but the headliners, the famous names that people are going to look at are Slayton, Ojolari, and Pinnock, and I don't think any of them are make or break. I think Slayton would be better suited going someplace else for him personally, like Saquon was. I think Slayton would do better someplace else. Pinnock, I would like to bring back, but only if it's reasonable. And there's not anyone really on this list that I would shed a tear over. Um, of all the guys that are on here that I think have a future, it's the exclusive rights free agent Deontay Johnson, the inside linebacker. I could see him becoming a starter. I'm looking at this list, but I mean, I don't. Dory Jackson is. I don't want him coming back. We talked about the offensive lineman. There's no one really there. Smith Marset, the returner. I would like maybe him have another year with him as the returner, but I don't see anybody. I mean, do you, John? And I don't see.
Me personally, no. The only guy I like I like Johnson that you mentioned.
Yeah.
You're going to bring DeVito back. They already
Right.
said that he's the only quarterback they have. Just because of a knowledge base, when you bring a bunch of people who don't even know anything about you want at least one person who knows the plays a little bit in meetings. I don't want him on the team when we make it to the roster, but while you're doing the offseason, you got to have somebody who at least knows what's going on. And of that, after that, there isn't really anybody else. The only one guy that I'm kind of okay with, and you're not, I already know this, is
Mhm.
I'm okay if we bring back Van Roten at a cheap deal because I want a veteran, a guy who knows the stuff and who can play multiple positions. He's friends with the Maluminor. They know the offensive line coach. He knows his stuff. Is he great? No, but if I needed to plug him in at the last second, yeah, I want that veteran guy back there, but I would like, people to beat him out as far as being starters, but I
Mhm.
wouldn't mind. But there isn't anybody you have to have. The guy I don't want, do not bring back Darius Slayton. I do not want Slayton on the
I
roster.
would say that's where I disagree. I just wouldn't mind bringing him back, but I don't want him as the starter in terms of frontline money. So I wouldn't
And
mind. There's 20.
Slayton
Those are
catches
20.
caught a lot of
Oh,
passes, and I think that you have to replace that. It's not necessarily so easy. One thing I would
right.
worry about if you bring Slayton back is that now he's got a spot and now we're full up. Now, if we want to bring somebody, if they want to draft somebody or bring somebody else in, who do they push out? You can't carry 12 wide receivers, and you
Right.
don't want to put a lot of put all that. On the other hand, I he caught a lot of passes, and from our quarterback crew, which is not that great. So
Right. And that's what I
I
mentioned earlier before you came on. I said how much of his lack of productivity is due to the quarterbacks that he was playing
and
with.
I think you can see that about all of our wide receivers to get
Yes.
away from just quick. People are like to you know say Robinson is not that great and Hyde is not that great, and I don't know. I think given the situation that we are in and that we've been in with just no one who can throw the ball competently, I don't know that you can fairly judge these guys, which doesn't necessarily mean that we should keep them. But it's
And
a
there and there are only four guys right now we have under contract. So it's Hyatt, Malik Neighbors, Wandell Robinson, and Ford Wheaton. We don't have any other wide receivers. So that's as low as I can remember in February. Maybe it's happened before, but so that would argue that they need bodies. It's the question is should Slayton be one of those bodies?
Well,
John says no. I am like, I'm not sure.
so other teams have the triplets, right? The Cowboys had the triplets. The Bengals now currently have the triplets. You have Burrow, you have Chase, you have Higgins. Those would be the triplets. We had the Stooges. We had Jones, Barkley, and Slayton. All of them accounted for no freaking wins, really. They've counted for nothing really going forward. Barkley took off with another team. Congratulations. Enjoy your life. Slayton, go live your truth somewhere else. That's what I'm saying. I said it before. He can go. He's meant nothing to this team. We can find another guy to catch passes, and it doesn't matter. Your guy is Neighbors. You've got Wandale to be the specialty guy. It's really, is Hyatt going to be anything, or are we drafting or signing a guy? I think we're going to sign a wide receiver, and I think it's going to be a fairly expensive one.
Well, one thing I do want to say about Barkley is Barkley had every opportunity to rub our faces in this, and he's really handled this with
Oh,
class.
sure.
I
Agreed.
mean, I don't know if I would be as classy as he's being right now if I was in his shoes. So God bless him because he has every right in the world to basically, you know, crow a little bit, and he's not doing it. So I don't know if that's because he's got a lot of friends still on that team and respect for the organization. I don't think he cares very much for Joe Schoen. I think that's because of the business decision that occurred. But I will say this: I expected him to be a little bit more vocal after the win, and
I
he's
think
handled
he's
himself with a lot of class.
I think he's just happy not to be here, and
Yeah,
and I semi
And
related.
healthy.
What?
And healthy, too.
Hey,
This
he
is
is
the first
healthy.
time he was healthy for the whole year.
He's stayed healthy for the whole year, and I don't think he wanted to stay here. I don't think he wanted to
Yeah.
re-sign in 2023. He didn't want to re-sign this year. He didn't want to re-sign at all. I think that's one of the reasons that that they couldn't come to an agreement, and they had to tag him and all this other nonsense. that he just didn't want to stay here. And I think he did want to go to Philadelphia. I mean, I've read some things that he turned down more money from other teams so that he could go to Philadelphia, that's really where he wanted to go. So he
I
got
was
everything he
told that
wanted.
too.
And so he's, the best revenge is living well. And you can't live any better than Saquon Barkley right now. He's got a ring. He's got, he's in the city where he wants to be. So there's no reason for him to do it to like, try and rub our faces in it, because why would you do that? He's got everything he wanted. And so, that's that. And if he goes down next year and he's injured or whatever, misses half the season, the Eagles are like, we don't care. We won the Super Bowl, so who cares?
Right, and
Right.
he's running behind arguably the best offensive line in football.
That's
So
that's true too. And as much as people say, hey, we gave the Eagles a Super Bowl win, if the Eagles signed Devin Singletary, they would still win the Super Bowl. I think that's absolutely true. If we had re-signed Saquon Barkley, maybe we win one more game, maybe two. We don't get the Tyron Tracy, fumble to lose the game at the end, maybe, maybe we do. But Eagles win the Super Bowl. They signed Devin Singletary for some strange reason. The Eagles still win the Super Bowl.
I think Gary makes a
great,
point.
good team.
I think Gary makes a point that a lot of Giants fans have missed out on, and that is, and I think it's becoming more clear. I think Saquon did not want to come back, and I don't think that's being recognized or discussed enough. And I think there's enough signs that point to that. So people who say, um, um, the Giants should have re-signed him this last offseason. Some of this was not within their hands unless they franchised him again. So I think people have to come to terms to that it was better, and it's been proven that it was better for Saquon to leave and go someplace else, because everything got better for him personally and professionally after he did that. And as Gary said, why should you complain about the outcome?
Yeah,
To clear up one misnomer from the site earlier today, there was a conversation why the Giants didn't franchise him so that they could then work a deal out.
Right.
If the Giants franchise tagged Saquon Barkley in free agency, that money is tied up immediately. You can't sign other players with the money you've already given to your franchise player. So if they were going to work out a deal, that would drag on. Illuminor doesn't sign with the Giants. You're not getting John Runyon. You would be busy trying to deal with however you're going to deal with Barkley, and teams know you're over the barrel, that you're either going to take the deal they offered him or you're going to rescind your franchise tag and he's going to go. Giants had no choice. There was no way they were going to be able to tag him a second time.
Well, I mean, what realistically, what could we have gotten for him anyway, right? I mean, unless he's going to cooperate and say, okay, I'm going to sign with the team I'm going to go to, and he wanted to go to Philadelphia, so that's, unless another team offered him like a huge amount of money, what is that worth? It's like what they said we should have traded him, we should have traded him last year, which we should have, but it's not like there was, not we were going to get like a number one or a number two or even a number three for him. So it's not, maybe we would have gotten an extra a 6 or a 5, maybe. But I don't think
we would have gotten way more than that. We would have definitely at a minimum mid-season, you would have gotten a low 1 or a 2. There's no doubt in my mind.
That's the big question, because we know they got offers, at least based on, I don't remember if it was Schoen or Dable, but not last year, 2023, they did say they had received offers, but they weren't interested. It would be nice to know, and we'll never know, what the offers were in 2023, because that's where they open up themselves to criticism is, and I don't want to put words in both of your mouths, but I think it came across that the divorce in Hard Knocks was mutual. I don't think there was we know John Mara wanted to keep Saquon based on his comments, but I think it came across pretty strongly that Joe Schoen wasn't really pushing hard to bring back Barkley. At least that was my take. So if you kind of knew that was the case, that's why I was, when they were, they had a horrible year in 2023. Boy, if they were offered a 2, and you could have kept them.
Yeah, no, if they were offered a second day pick and they didn't take it, then
We don't know.
We don't know. We don't know. I find it hard. I mean, it's just, you're really going to trade it. Was a team going to really trade away a really valuable pick for a half-year rental for a running back, unless that's the key piece that gets you to the big games, right?
Like the
Say,
Bills.
listen, we don't have a good running back.
Bills, Chiefs, somebody like that. Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. I'm dubious.
So the bigger question though for me is, it was obvious that even with the cinema magic of Hard Knocks, of the reality portion of it, it was obvious that Schoen wasn't on board with spending that kind of money on Barkley. Where was Daboll in that equation? We know Merritt was over here. He wants to keep Barkley, but he's letting Schoen kind of dictate how that's going in this offseason. Where's Daboll in that mix? Did he want Barkley back? Was he kind of
told.
You don't even see him talk about it in Hard Knocks.
I don't know. It's hard to say. I can definitely see that he might want to bring him back because he provides a bit of a bit of a safety net for you.
Yeah.
If things don't work out well, at least we have Barkley and we can feed him the ball and it won't be terrible. But I think it's kind of a mistake to try and analyze Hard Knocks too much, because I think, as you said, it's reality TV, which means it's not reality at all. So
Right.
you try and like find little nuggets that look like they're something real. Like what Mara said, I think that's real or fairly real, and Shane's attitude towards Barkley, I think that's pretty real. But a lot of it is obviously, as you've talked about it before, a lot of it is very, very staged.
Yeah.
Look on my phone when I
was seeing this in here.
Come on.
Or like when they asked Daboll, would you trade up for Jaden Daniels? And he was like, oh yeah, I'd trade up for him. But as John has said repeatedly, they conveniently left May completely out of the discussion.
Well, and the funny thing is, he didn't say Daniels. He said, would you trade up for him? And he goes, Daniels? Yes. So, but they never mentioned May. But that's the only team we were really trying to move up with, was New England for May. Right. Because they already knew where the other two were going.
Right. And Gary wants to, setting up Gary a little bit here. And I kind of agree with him. The BBI has, and that's not me defending him because I'm on the fence. Gary, I think, takes issue with the groupthink that has occurred on BBI with the attacks on Joe Schoen. I think you want to give him more of a chance.
I think I do. I think that my opinion is that we've had some misfortune, but I think this last year, as far as the draft, has been good, and I think there's a lot of things that Schoen didn't do that I think that he maybe should have done, but maybe Mara said that you can't. I'm not. It's hard to say. My biggest criticism of how things have gone in the last 3 years is that we didn't draft a quarterback at all. Not even like a low, whatever. It's like on a 3rd round, 4th round, take a flyer, or bring in somebody who, could compete, with Jones at any point. I feel that if you're going to get rid of that option, you're going to decline Jones' 5th-year option. You have to bring in somebody else who's going to compete with him. And so the question is, why didn't he do that? You have to say, if you're declining that option, it means I don't believe in him, right? That's what you're saying. You're saying, I don't believe, I'm not convinced that Jones is the quarterback of the New York Giants for the future. So I'm not going to pay him for that 5th year, and I'm going to make him prove it, which was the right thing to say, which was the right thing to do at that point. But to do that and not bring in another quarterback who could legitimately challenge him, even in training camp, that's, I don't know what, it's like they've wrapped him in cotton and they're not allowed to hurt his feelings at all. You bring someone in. Why didn't they do that? Why didn't they draft someone? Why didn't they draft someone low, this year? Why didn't they? But the Giants haven't brought in a quarterback they haven't drafted a quarterback. Jones is like the first quarterback we drafted in since whatever, Davis Webb. You should be bringing in quarterbacks every once in a while, every 2-3 years, at least bring somebody in who might be good, not not someone like DeVito who, has overperformed what he should be,
Right.
but even still, he's
Right.
not.
And
Anyone who
that's
thinks he's going to be the starter is you're eating too many cutlets. I'm sorry.
and that's and that's
Nice.
smart, and that's what Go Terps has mentioned a number of times is you just keep taking swings at the quarterbacks until you get
Right,
it right.
right.
And one thing that just doesn't still sit well with me, and I still can't wrap my head around it completely, is they went into this season not, and they admitted this again on Hard Knocks again, so much you can take, but they weren't completely sure Daniel Jones would even be ready for the start of the season, let alone the start of training camp. So they were hoping, but they weren't completely sure. And we saw from their massive interest in trading up, that they weren't completely sold on Daniel anyways. So I'm still struggling with is they went into this year
It's
having
very
doubts about the
confusing.
quarterback situation, but not having a fallback, which
Right.
you're talking about.
It's right. And so the only question is, how much is John Mara, is this from John Mara, right? How much is Mara saying we're not going to do this? We want to give Jones a full chance and not, I don't know, hurt his feelings by bringing in Russell Wilson or someone else who might have actually legitimately challenged him in training camp and might actually start, I mean, I'm not completely sold on Sam Darnold, but if we had signed Sam Darnold this year and we could have won 8 or 9 games, I think,
Right.
fairly easily. It's not, I think it's outside the realm of possibility. And
It just,
so,
I'm sorry.
no, yeah, so go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, it just seems odd to me that they didn't leave themselves an insurance
Right,
policy. That's
right.
what.
It's no, and
I think it speaks to it's a division of thought. We've seen it. I think, and we talked about it. There seemed to be a weird, like almost, I felt like an almost guarantee that they were told you will be coming back if certain things happen, but you're going to do this. And I think the Jones thing and why you didn't bring in competition. That's why Drew Lock was signed. He knew he wasn't competition, and I don't think he cared that he wasn't competition. Russell Wilson, on the other hand, was told blatantly, you're coming in to back up. You wouldn't be coming in to compete for and he's
But
not taking that
why?
job.
But
Well, because
why?
I think because they keep going with that 2-year thing. They keep saying 2 years. Now they're saying it like they knew all along it was a 2-year trial, which tells me that the contract piece of it was designed forcibly. I still believe, I can't prove it, that it was meant so that the franchise tag could be used on Barkley. And they did that. But you had to sign Jones to make that happen. So you inflate the numbers, but it's ultimately 2 years. And they're like, you got to prove it during those 2 years. But now they feel like a year in, it's not working. Mara's going to go, wait a minute. You said 2 years that you would give him 2 years. We paid him for 2 years. I'm not paying another quarterback. Prove that if he
So
can't
you're
do it,
arguing,
right.
you're
And I
so,
think that there's that, and there's also saying, well, he got injured in the first year of his contract. You have to at least give him,
right.
a full thing. And I think if you looked at how things shook out after Jones got, after he got demoted, there's obviously a lot of institutional support for him for some weird reason. There seemed to be a lot of people who are unhappy, coming out of in the Giants organization or on the team or whatever. And so he had some sort of in that people seemed to really like him, and they wanted to give him every single chance that he could possibly have until it was abundantly clear, and then beyond that he was not going to get the job done. So can and so the question is Shane to blame for that? I don't know. I find it hard to believe that he is, but maybe he is. Maybe he's the one who really loved Daniel Jones. I don't know.
See, I'm on
that's
board
what we
with
don't
you.
know. We
See,
don't
I'm on
just.
board. I'm on board with you. I think Joe Shane has done a better job than people give him credit for, and I think Brian Daboll has done a worse job than people actually say. I think Dayball's lived off from some very lucky things that happened in that first year that he has not been able to replicate since. And his problems with his staff, the fact that he had issues with Wink, and Wink creates issues for sure. You brought in a guy who wanted to be a head coach, but the clashing there, but he's had clashes with other people. He's not gotten along, and the way he's treated Kafka, that's unobvious. That's another sign. So I think Dayball is far worse at his job than Joe Schoen is. And I think Joe Shane's just been unlucky. If Thibodeau lived up to where he was drafted in a way a lot of people thought, and if Evan Neal was the offensive tackle that most people thought he was coming
Everyone thought.
I think it's the Evan Neal. The Evan Neal thing is a big thing. I mean, people like to say about Thibodeau. I mean, Thibodeau hasn't been quite the he hasn't been the dominant type player that you really had hoped for when you draft him in that position. But the thing is that the draft is always a crapshoot, and the fact that he has been a quality starter. You know, if Evan Neal was the Kevin Thibodeau of right tackles, we would all be very happy, right? I think we would all be over the moon. Okay, he's he's not that super nasty kill everybody right tackle, but he's a quality starter. Started pretty much every game, didn't get injured, whatever. We'd be like, that was maybe not the greatest pick, but that was a very good high quality pick. I'm not really concerned about Thibodeau. Neal was just I don't know. I feel that that's just bad luck. That's just, you pick somebody who is very highly rated, who everybody liked, and he just turns out to be, I don't even know. He has some injured or mental problems, or
it's
just
really
can't
weird
play the game, or what.
Because if he had gone number one in that draft, no one would have batted an eye. At times
Dallas loved him.
And there were times that he was projected to go. It's just one of the weirder. By the way, you have to show people your jersey.
Oh yeah, so this is I'm wearing my Harry Carson jersey. I don't wear it. I don't wear it very often.
I have one just like that. I can't find it. I don't know where my Harry Carson jersey went.
I also have this. I dug this out, so I don't really wear hats, but this is
I got mine right over there.
This
is a BBI hat, which I got.
That was from Ed when Ed made the hat.
It has. It's it's just I keep it around because it really reminds me of great times. Being up in Albany with all you guys up there, and Hope and all those people, and Bob, and it was that was just a magical time, I think, to be a Giants fan.
Albany was and I've been to 4 places where the Giants have had training camps. Pace, God, what was the place in New Jersey? I can't think of right after Pace.
Dickinson? Is it
Fairleigh Dickinson? And of course where they are now, and Albany. Albany by far was the best. Albany was so fun, and it was the whole vibe. It was the guys and gals that were there. It was what was going on with the Giants. It was the way you could see the team practice, the bar.
Where did they train in the 50s? Do you know?
You've mentioned this before.
I have.
Up in your neck of the woods.
In my old neck of the woods. That's correct.
Yes.
St. Michael's College in Vermont. They trained in St. Michael's College in Vermont. Yep.
Yeah. But Albany was awesome. I wish they would go back to Albany.
I mean, I obviously the practicality of it now, they have all their stuff there in the next to the Meadowlands. They have stands and whatever. I went there. I've been there, I don't know, 2-3 times. But it's, you're sitting in the bleachers in a parking lot behind a fence, and it's just not, the experience is not really, the juice is not worth the squeeze. I'm sorry to say that. I mean, maybe if they were winning, I might be more excited to go and see some players, but Albany was good to go, even if they were terrible.
And there was a lot of funny BBI things that used to happen, because we used to have something called the Lance Scott newsletter. That was sort of a tongue-in-cheek thing. And I remember Lance Scott actually walked by, and somebody mentioned the newsletter, and he looked over at us, and he was really pissed. He was angry. He knew what it was. And it was just stuff like that. And I remember the time when Kent Graham was there, because his sister used to put on the site, and she arranged it for us to meet Kent Graham. And he saw this group of people coming at him, and he had a look of terror on his face, like, "Is this all right? Are these people sane?" That was fun. Just a lot of great memories. So, with Hope too. So that was.
We're about to hit.
Fun.
Well, this too, but I'm talking about in general. We're about to hit funny season, where asshats come out of the woodwork every year. We get the ASAT term. If you don't know what that means, it means people who share information, like they have inside information, and sometimes some of them do, and most of the time they're just making it up. But are we going to have a reappearance? Do either one of you think we will have a reappearance of Glove One? Will Glove One make his way back here?
No, that was a one-time thing,
I
and
think
that guy had to be an agent or a family member of the Mannings. That was one of the great BBI moments in history. Where, and for people out there listening who don't really know what we're talking about, somebody registered named as Glove One and predicted the Eli Manning trade down to a T, except they included OCU Manora, who apparently was originally part of the request from the Chargers. And you even mentioned that when Eli would get picked, would not put on the Chargers hat, and then the trade would happen after the pick. And then that person after that went down, emailed us and said, please delete my account. So whoever that was
like the NFL snoops were after him.
Yeah, whoever that was fun. And then the 220, the 2005 off season was funny. It was the Plaxico season where we had a bunch of people all over the place with reports on what was going on and who was
coming. The plane coming in, he was going to get. So we had Plaxico, Kareem McKenzie, LeVar Arrington. I mean, there was a lot of big things that were happening in that 05 kind of area where, he's not coming. Well, wait, now he is. He flew in. They're taking him to the hospital for an exam. Like,
there was somebody from the hospital who was saying he was there getting his exam. I mean, it was wild. It was just like, I think Pat Hanlon was getting nervous at that point because it was like, where are all these reports coming from? So
it's fun though. It's fun, and people who come out, so how do you give a little peel back the curtain? So how do you manage the site from a day-to-day perspective in terms of so much is being posted in there and things that are happening? And we have different moderators, but explain a little bit of the day-to-day management of the site.
I look at the site. I try to look at the site every day. I try to see what's being posted. I mean, most of the time the site runs itself. Sometimes it runs away, like it's the server. Our server is very old. Like we were hoping to switch to a new server maybe sometime in the next couple months. But our server is very old, so sometimes things run away. We there's either a lot of traffic or we get hammered by bots, and so then I have to look at the load. Sometimes the server has to be rebooted because it gets hung up. But most of the time, most of the time it does just pretty much run itself. I mean, it's I don't do a lot of the moderation these days. I do Eric and the other mods who come in and do the moderation. Sometimes if I'm reading something and it's starting to go off the rails, I'll turn off the comments or whatever, do a moderation thing. But I don't necessarily do that. I see all the moderation requests as they come through, and I have a list of, as the activity log of all the moderation actions, so that I can see that the things that are happening are supposed to be happening properly. But I don't intervene that much anymore. I have other things that I'm busy doing, but but the site itself, like I said, it mostly runs itself. I do hope that we can maybe this year try to get things a little bit more improved, a better server, maybe a little bit more of an update on the site itself. But the thing is that BBI, as Eric has said before, the soul of BBI is the corner, and I don't know that I want to mess with it too much. It works. It's a very, very, very old school, format for how forum works. So much so that when we're going, doing stuff with our ad partners, we had weird things. So like, how do you run your server? And they're like, no, you can't cache these pages because they're being generated dynamically, all the time, even though they're not, even though it's even though it has the same URL, you can't just cache those URLs. It doesn't work that way. And we've had some weird things in the past where people see that sometimes if they're not logged in. But it's very charming in its way. There's nothing, that there was a time when internet forums was like the big thing. They were huge. Giants.com had one, everyone had one. And now everyone's on social media. They're on Twitter and X and
Right.
via Facebook and whatever. So those kind of replaced it, but they're not really a replacement. It's not the same thing in any way. To talk to somebody on Facebook is not the same as having a forum where it's like, you can go back and you can look at the whole conversation and you can go back and forth. And so I think it's very special. And so I'm hesitant to change things too much.
Well, it's interesting, real quickly, that when we've polled people whether we should change, views are very split, and some people are like, "Don't you dare change it."
Right.
No, it is a retro thing. Even Tiki Barber mentioned it, I think about a year ago. He was on it, and he actually mentioned BBI online, and he said, "Man, that's like going back in time."
It is.
And the other thing is part of the problem is if we do, and we may have to do this at some point because who knows how long, you know, this old technology will even be able to survive as we move further along. But when I look at some of the out of the box software options, not all of them are very appealing. Some of them are. There are some that are interesting, but I don't like a lot of the bells and whistles that some of these things have with avatars, and there's a lot of clutter. And the one thing I will say, other than the ads, and I'm hoping just for everyone out there, I'm revisiting the ad issue because one of the ad companies I have is there's too many ads on the site, so we may scale that back. Um, but VBI's the forum is very clean. It's very easy to read, I think, and
Yeah.
I think that's a selling point to it. If we get cut back the ads some, sometimes the reply function, if you have a long response and somebody's responding to that, those blocks can get a little long. But for the most part, it's a very clean look. And you go on to some of these other forums that are out there that have survived. They're difficult for me. I think that's difficult to sift through at times.
I
Yeah,
agree.
the site is very much it's the only thing that kind of comes close is Reddit.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever been if you've gone Reddit a lot. Reddit is similar in a lot of ways to the way the traditional forum works. And so if there is a New York Giants Reddit, and I'm on that. It's kind of all right. But the only the biggest issue I have with the site from a usability standpoint is that it still is not that great on a phone. I've tried to make
Oh
some
yeah,
tweaks to
yeah,
do that. It's
yeah.
hard to look at it on a phone, and I have like some examples that I try to make it better. But I showed it to people, thought people didn't like it. It's different. I don't know. We'll have to see how it goes going forward.
All right.
Excellent. Well, with that, I don't know if we want to wrap it up
Yeah,
with
we're gonna wrap a
where I
good
think
side
we're.
because my wife is going to say, "You told me we were going to be done by dinner."
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I know. I have to cook dinner too, so
So,
we do have to.
But we should do this again. I think we should
yeah.
have, like Gary said, maybe a round table at some point on maybe just the website at some point. But it's also just fun to hear Gary's views on the Giants too. And like he said earlier to us offline, you and I agree on a lot of things, and it's good to have a different opinion on here. And I think we should do more of that. So.
So without getting real deep, before I end it, I'm gonna add two names. I'm gonna throw them out there. I don't want to hear how it would be done. I just want to know if it would be a yay or a nay. Matthew Stafford, yay or nay? If you could get him, I don't care how we did it, so let's not to worry about what it would take. Yes or no, you would want him as a quarterback for the Giants next year.
Absolutely, absolutely, I would want him.
We can't ask about cost.
Yeah,
No,
no,
because
I mean,
if we can't control that, I'm just saying if it were possible.
If
if
Matthew Stafford is on this team, this is a much, much different and much, much better football team.
Okay,
yeah,
then the
But
other.
there's a lot of caveats to that.
Okay, yeah, you
Well,
can't cheat.
yeah,
You can't cheat.
yeah,
I told you there were the rules.
yes.
And the other one is the other guy who's a little bit older, Aaron Rodgers. I'm a yay. I'm a yay.
I'm very conflicted about Aaron Rodgers because I think that, especially if we draft someone this year who's, we think will be the future, but we want to win some games, he's a good choice. I think he's got at least one more year in him. and hopefully we could get him and it won't be too expensive. But he's a whack job. He's a complete and total whack job. And so I don't know. I'm going to say more yes than no. I'm going to go maybe 60% yes, maybe 65% yes. How about that?
My concern is something Dave brought up that I didn't see posted on the website that I didn't think about earlier is his personality is so strong that I wonder if that would be a problem for Brian Daboll, who's already on the hot seat. So again, if you put him on this team, this is a much, much better team with him on it than, I mean, I guess between the two, I'd rather have Matthew Stafford. He's younger and there's less baggage. Cost factors into this. With both, you're talking about short-term rental, right? For both of them?
Yeah.
Well, you would have, I mean, for Rodgers for sure, because he's 41, 42.
Right. Rodgers is not gonna, I mean, you could maybe get 2 years out of him if you were lucky at this point. You know, you hope that you get a year out of him so that you can put some wins on the, you know, put some numbers in the W column, you know, make people feel a little bit better about the team, and then, you know, and next year start whoever you drafted or whatever, however you worked it out next year, you know, if you had to. But yeah, I don't know.
And Stafford's a little different. Stafford, I would look at is you could get 2 solid years out of him, maybe a third if he wants to, but it's also whether he wants to. But
because he's talked about retirement too. That's what makes me nervous.
But he's made it clear he's coming back though. He already put that on the table.
You and I have talked about this. We heard back before the trade deadline the Giants were trying to trade for him. I think there's more smoke here. I would not discount the fact that they hired his brother-in-law as an assistant coach as being a sign that they're still making a play for him.
I think one of the things that was abundantly clear was at the very end of the season, they met with Daboll. We don't know what was discussed. I think Shane was already decided. We've talked about this. They made a very good point, emphasized a point, all three of them, when they talked, that the Giants were going to be looking at quarterbacks, and they mentioned trade and free agency. They mentioned the word trade, and you don't normally say that at all. Even you just say we're going to look at all the avenues. They were specific, and I have a sneaking feeling. I've told you this all along. I have a feeling that that's what they've been planning to do. That was part of their discussion. Was you're going to come back if you can be the guy you were in 22. We'll go get a guy, but you got to prove you were the coach.
Well, there's an ass hat on the website today. I don't know true or not, but they're saying the Giants have contemplated trading their 3rd round pick for Stafford. And that 3rd round pick is the first pick in the 3rd round. I'm not sure I do that for a 1-year rental. I'm not, because that's a starter on this team.
Yeah, so, but think of it this way, right? I'm willing to do that because if let's say quarterbacks go 1-2, now I don't have to move. I don't need to worry about it. I can still get a Jackson Dart a little bit later. No matter how much I want Abdul Carter, if I'm the Giants and I'm worried about further depth, I drop from 3.
But can you get Jackson Dart without having that 3rd round pick to move up?
Sure.
To the end of the
take him in the 2nd round. If you drop down from 3, you pick up some extra picks.
But you might need that 3rd to trade back up into the 1st round.
I'm thinking you're not gonna. I don't see him going in the 1st round. Right. I think you're looking. I think you're looking at an Alex Smith, Aaron Rodgers quarterback draft where there were 2 quarterbacks and Rodgers dropped way down. There's nobody else in that group that anybody's going to be going, I got to get him in the 1st round. There's too many other really good
let's save this for another show because we're going late. We're getting on to 90 minutes again. So let's save this for another show. We'll discuss this. But yeah, Gary, any final thoughts before we get off?
No, I don't think that. I don't think so. I think that one thing I didn't want to say, which I don't know, I think we've talked about the Daniel Jones contract so much. I don't know, but the only thing I would say for people who criticize the decision to sign him as we did, is that at that point in the Giants, you know, whatever, that was our first winning season in 5 seasons. That was the first playoff win in over a decade. And so for a new GM to come in and say, we're not going to re-sign the quarterback. I don't know that I don't know how many GMs, how many first-year GMs would have the balls to say, nah, I don't think he's worth the money. We're gonna go in a different direction. I just think that was, the difficulty of it was so huge that they had to sign him. And I think at the time, what I said was, I think this is the least worst thing that we could do. And
Right. But you're not wrong, but it was the wrong thing.
It was.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, no.
It's like I said back in 2022, that year, when they were 6-2 at the break, I said they should trade Saquon right now. But there was no way they could have done that.
No way. There's no way that they would.
No way they could have done that. But going back in time, if I could go back and do that, that's exactly what I would have done. I mean, because that was the time to sell on Saquon, because he was having a monster first half.
Your options were you trade him, or you work the deal out and you sign him and give him the contract that he wants, and worry about the offseason with Jones later. Because you weren't signing Jones during the season. You still hadn't proven for the whole year. That was your two options. Either sign him or trade him. And they didn't do either one.
At that point,
but I did say I would trade him then.
I agree.
I took a lot of grief for that, but I said, trade him now. This is the time to do it. But you couldn't, like Gary said, boy, how do you do that if you're the GM? But that would have been great.
I mean, if you were like a really experienced long-term GM, and you said, you're willing to take the heat and said, okay, I've done this, maybe you could look at some GMs who could have pulled the trigger on that because they knew it was the right thing to do and they figured that they could withstand the pressure. But being a first-year GM, first time ever being GM of a team,
think about this. If they make that trade, they were not good in the second half of that season with Saquon.
Right.
If they got rid of Saquon, like I suggested, they probably don't make the playoffs. And everybody in New York is going, why the hell did you trade? You were cruising to the division and you traded Saquon, you idiot.
It was a very similar, slightly different situation than in 2004. When you had Kurt Warner and a winning record.
Yes.
And you benched him. But the difference was you benched him and put Eli in and ran with it. If you trade Barkley, you don't have another superstar and you didn't have your quarterback. So I can see the optics there, but I would have traded him. Same as you.
Gary's right. It would have been almost virtually impossible.
It's a huge ask beyond, I think, the ability of anybody who might reasonably be in that position, right?
Oh yeah, because I'm not in that position. I'm not.
I mean, it's easy for us to say,
"Here, have another beer, Eric."
Right.
So, all right. So with that, we'll wrap it up. Thanks to Gary for coming on, giving a little bit behind the scenes, giving us a look at NASA NASA in the 1970s. Now, and talking Giants and with the Carson jersey, who was a guy that we interviewed back in the day. So that was awesome. So, of course, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we'll catch you again soon. And don't forget, coming up in about a month from now, in fact, it's just less than a month from now, we will be live when the opening of the It's Allowed to Be Tampering time in free agency. Looking forward to that. But again, like, subscribe, and we'll catch you again real soon.